1937. This painting recalls the only earlier painting of similar intensity, the Self-Portrait of 1923. It has the same monumentalization of the figure and concentration in the face. But instead of a multifaceted application of color, dark and light lines build up the forms. A framework of energy lines compellingly evoke reality, yet have no mass. Apple on a Sideboard, 1937. Apple on the Sideboard, 1937. Here, Giacometti was concentrating on a single apple placed at the exact center of his field of vision. He expressed the decreasing exactitude toward the edges of that field in the summary execution of the painting. As though conducting a phenomenological exploration, Giacometti did not naively seek to transfer reality directly onto the canvas, but to realize the picture of reality held within his inner perception. Pope Innocent X, after Velázquez, circa 1936, dated 1942. His copy, Pope Innocent X, after Velázquez, rendered in a more direct drawing style, buoyed up by a rhythmic microstructure, reflects characteristics of the Master of X in a form that is considerably more direct. Head Studies, 1937. Study from a Head of Didefre, 1937. Study from an Egyptian Relief, 1937. Three Studies of Gudea Head, 1937. Vases and Flowers, 1938. The Chiffonnier, 1941. Interior, 1942. Automatic Drawing, 1943. Small Bust on a Double Pedestal, 1940-45. Small Figure on a Pedestal, 1940-45. Small Figure on a Pedestal, 1940-45. While the perceived distance of viewer to figure in a painting can be fixed by the painted illusion of space, sculpture does not offer this possibility. Making even smaller figures, Giacometti tried to impart the lived experience of distance. In order to distinguish his tiny figures from miniature close-ups, he retained their sketchy forms and placed them on oversized pedestals, thereby defining the relationship of motif and field of vision, as in a picture frame. Nude, 1942-43. Woman with Chariot, 1942-43. Giacometti constructed this sculpture not as he normally did in clay over a wire armature, but with plaster applied directly to a straw core. Thus, this plainly formed body has something of the amorphous quality of a rag doll. Elongated, rounded in its cross-sections, the individual shapes as uniform as those of a young child. Volume and surface, accordingly, seem to be floating, no longer sustained by basic geometric forms or permeated with vital organic impulse. Studio Interior, 1940. Three Portraits of Pierre Loeb, 1946. Decisive progress is evident in his draftsmanship. While he was still in Switzerland, the rigid forms of the late 1930s were already starting to loosen somewhat, and the space around them was acquiring a certain transparency. In 1946, this process accelerated noticeably, as can be witnessed from the following studies. Apples, 1946. Jean-Paul Sartre, 1946. Homage to Balzac, 1946. The Artist's Mother, 1946. Head of Diego, 1947. Head on a Rod, 1947. The viewer is immediately assailed by the presence of an impaled head that seems alarmingly alive. This mingling of the lifelike and the rigid had a particular meaning for Giacometti. By turning the head of his model into an enduring, immutable, though animated form, he in effect petrified the life of it. The Nose, 1947. The nose shifts the opposed elements presented in the surrealist sculpture to include the viewer, whose gaze, confronted by the thrusting, aggressive blade of the nose, is met by that of death, breaking out of its sphere. The Leg, 1958. The leg has a severed and mutilated aspect, which probably found its source in an earlier accident, where the artist was hit by a car and broke his foot. Giacometti sought to raise what was low. A foot is lifted out of the dust and placed on a pedestal, and a leg becomes memorial. The Hand, 1947. The mannequin's hand, used to decorate fashion shop windows, has become admonitorially memorial, a severed and eerie mutilated limb. Figures in an Interior, 1946. If Giacometti's figures insist on the amorphous materiality of their being, their postures belong to the highest reaches of rhetoric. Their stance first emerged in drawings, in notes made in the street or sketches of groups of figures reduced to bundles of lines. Standing Woman, 1947. This frontal female figure rises from the ground like a vision and is fixed to the paper with almost convulsive intensity. Standing Woman, 1946. Femme Léonie, 1947. Tall Figure, 1947. Standing Woman, 1948. Standing Woman, 1948. Man Walking in the Rain, 1948. Walking Man, 1947. Giacometti's self-image as an artist always searching, striving to move forward, is here exemplified. The pace of Walking Man, the first large figure of its kind, is closer to the solemnity of Egyptian statues than to the dramatic striding of Rodin's own Walking Man. The artist's figure moves forward tentatively, as though making a first-ever attempt at walking. City Square, 1948. The Cage, Woman and Head, Detail, 1950. This image can be understood as a representation of a dialogue, in the sense that the head, growing out of the block, self-awareness, assimilates and integrates with the image of impinging perceived reality, the statuette, within the realm of the imagination, the bars of the cage.